Vishvatmana yatra nivartate bihi. Sri Kavi Uvacha. Sri Kavi said, Manye, I consider, Akutasthit Bayam, fearlessness, Achyutasya, of the infallible Lord, Pada Ambuja, of the lotus feet, Upasanam, the worship, Atra, in this world, Nityam, constantly, Udivigya Bude, of one whose intelligence is disturbed, Asat, that which is only temporary, Atma Bhavat, by thinking to be the self, Vishva Atmana, thoroughly, Yatra, in which service to the Lord, Nivartate, ceases, Bihi, fear. Does anyone want to recite the verse?
Sri Kavi said, I consider that one whose intelligence is constantly disturbed by his false.
No, in Sanskrit. Anyone else? Mataji's? Translation. Sri Kavi said, I consider that one whose intelligence is constantly disturbed by falsely identifying himself with the temporary material world can achieve real freedom from fear only by worshiping the lotus feet of the infallible Supreme Lord. In such devotional service, all fear ceases entirely. Purport. In the opinion of Srila Sridhar Swami, the word asad atma bhavir in this verse indicates that the living entity is constantly disturbed by fear because he identifies his eternal self with the temporary material body and its paraphernalia. Similarly, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has stated, Bhakti Pratikula Deha Jehadisaktim, because of one's attachment to one's temporary body and so-called home, family, friends, and so on, one's intelligence is always disturbed by fear, and one is unable to appreciate or practice pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord. So-called religious activities executed in the bodily conception of life are always accompanied by fear and anxiety about the ultimate results. But pure devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead frees one from fear and anxiety because it is executed on the platform of Vaikuntha, on the spiritual plane, where there is no fear or anxiety. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the process of bhakti yoga is so powerful that even in the stage of sadhana bhakti, in which one is practicing devotional service through rules and regulations, the neophyte can have direct experience of fearlessness by the mercy of the Lord. As one's devotional service becomes mature, the Lord reveals himself to the devotee, and all fear is totally vanquished forever. Every living entity has a natural propensity to serve God, but because of false identification with the temporary body, one loses touch with this pure constitutional propensity, and instead inauspiciously becomes attached to temporary sense gratification in the form of body, home, family, and so on. The result of such false attachment is continuing distress, which can be eradicated only by devotional service to the Supreme Lord. In this connection, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati has quoted the following verse: Tavad Bhayam Dravina Deha Suhornimitam Soka Svirha Paribhavo Vipulas Chaloba Tavan Namati Asad Avagraha Artimulam Yavante Nagrim Abhayam Pravirita Lokaha. O my Lord, the people of the world are embarrassed by all material anxieties. They're always afraid. They're always trying to protect wealth, body, and friends. They are filled with lamentation and unlawful desires and paraphernalia, and they avariciously base their undertakings on the perishable conceptions of I and mine. As long as they do not take shelter of your safe lotus feet, they are full of such anxieties. I'll read the translation once more. Sri Kavi said, I consider that one whose intelligence is constantly disturbed by falsely identifying himself with the temporary material world can achieve real freedom from fear only by worshiping the lotus feet of the infallible Supreme Lord. In such devotional service, all fear ceases entirely. So this is a very important verse because it tells us of the position of the conditioned soul in the material world, constantly identifying with the material body, the conception of I and mine, and thinking himself the enjoyer, when actually we know from our spiritual master that Krishna is the only enjoyer. So one has to reconcile one's identifying with the material body and the conception of I and mine, and overcome that as one advances in spiritual life. Srila Prabhupada has given us devotional activities, 9 different types of devotional service, in which we can engage in our spiritual identity and leave this material conception of life behind. In 1968, when I was initiated, Prabhupada gave me the name Bali Mardana Das. And I don't think I really understood the full meaning of the name at the time, but as I learned, Bali Maharaj surrendered everything to the Lord, and for that he became a Mahajan, a Mahatma, one whose example we should follow. So this is what when we surrender to the spiritual master and take initiation, this is the first surrender. But what do we have to do after that? That's not, one doesn't advance by just being idle. One has to engage in service, because love means service, Srila Prabhupada says. So we have to engage in service to the lotus feet of the Lord. And as one engages in devotional service, one must overcome, problems as they come up. One's tendency to identify with I and mine, with possessiveness, with not being able to surrender everything to the Lord. So this is the main problem in devotional service, overcoming our material conceptions and being 100% engaged in the service of the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada was expert in engaging us. And we shouldn't think that he was sent to this planet alone. He also had other people who were sent to assist him, just like a king travels with his entourage to execute his instructions. So devotees were sent by Lord Chaitanya to assist Srila Prabhupada. We see example in Brahmananda Prabhu, great devotee of Srila Prabhupada. And he surrendered everything to Prabhupada and actually worked as a substitute teacher to pay the rent for 26 Second Avenue, where we were located at that time, because there was no income coming in. There were very little books, practically no books to distribute. Back to Godhead was started, then eventually the Macmillan Bhagavad-gita was published, and we started to have books, and then through Dinapan, we started printing books and were able to distribute. But in the beginning, Prabhupada depended in a sense on his disciples. But in actuality, his disciples were not serving him, he was serving them by engaging them in devotional service. That's how we have to think of devotional service. It's an honor. Just like it's an honor to worship these deities who Prabhupada loved so dearly that he made a promise to them to build this temple and to acquire this land. This dream started when Prabhupada used to go to meet Sumati Morarji, who lived in this area, and he would pass by this land and think, oh, this is such a nice piece of land for a temple to be located. And over time, Lord Chaitanya made that desire into reality. And Prabhupada engaged his disciples, not that he needed them, but they needed to be engaged in order to advance in spiritual life. Because Prabhupada wanted nothing more from his disciples than to become Krishna conscious and to advance in spiritual life, because the bond he makes at the time of initiation, that he's taking responsibility to bring these disciples back to home, back to Godhead. In fact, in 1977, while Prabhupada was still present in his physical form, Brahmananda and Tamal Krishna Goswami were in the room with Prabhupada, as well as Abhiram, who was his nurse at that time. And Brahmananda asked Prabhupada, because he was very worried about the future and his connection to Srila Prabhupada. So he asked Prabhupada, will we be together in the spiritual world? And what do you think Prabhupada said? Does anyone know? Prabhupada said, and he looked up and he said, in the spiritual world, the residents of Vaikuntha will be flying over in their flower airplanes, and they'll be looking down and saying, what a nice spiritual master and his disciples. So this is Prabhupada's promise to take us back to home, back to Godhead, if we follow him. He's holding the door open, but we have to use our free will to go through that doorway, to follow his instructions, to execute his orders, and to please him. That is the secret of spiritual life, pleasing the Guru, pleasing Srila Prabhupada. And in order to do that, what is required? What is required is one must have full faith in the words of the pure devotee and full faith in the instructions of Krishna in the Shastra, Bhagavad-gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So in his books, Prabhupada has given us all the tools that we need to go back to home, back to Godhead. And even if we make mistakes in our spiritual life, but we try to rectify our mistakes, Prabhupada will still take us home. There's a devotee I went to Japan with in 1969, I believe, and his name was Sudama. And after Srila Prabhupada left, in his physical form, he had a lot of issues, and he fell away from Krishna consciousness to some degree. But he got very sick at the end of his life, towards the end of his life. And at that time, he sought the association of devotees to bring back his full consciousness of Prabhupada and Krishna. So he was surrounded by devotees when he passed, and he couldn't move very well. He was so ill. But at the very end, he sat up and he looked at the door, and he sat up and he said, Prabhupada, you've come. So this is the pure devotee who comes even after we commit so many problematic things to bring us back to home, back to Godhead, if we can remember him. So this is to please the spiritual master is the most important thing in spiritual life. And doing what was needed in order to acquire this property and build this temple was very, very important to Srila Prabhupada. So you all have a unique opportunity to worship in a place that was so dear to Srila Prabhupada that he called it his office. And I was recently in a temple in New Delhi, Chippiwada, I think the name of it is. And Prabhupada lived in this temple from 1958 to 1965. And the deities there are very special. They've been there for 170 years. But Prabhupada's worship of these deities made it a very special place. And when you go there, you can feel Srila Prabhupada's presence. His original harmonium is still there that he used to play for the deities. But very special deities. If you look at Radharani, she's very unique appearance. And Lord Krishna was carved from a stone that's much harder than marble. It's so hard that it's not used anymore because marble is so much easier, but it's very beautiful if you look at the pictures that are available online. So this is, so to serve RadhaRasbihari, who Prabhupada promised to build the temple for, is very special. And when I was in New York and the devotees were collecting money for Srila Prabhupada, they didn't care that the money went to India, but they only cared to please Srila Prabhupada. So I think to glorify them, because many of those devotees were fully surrendered to Prabhupada, never complained about anything, just wanted to know what they could do to please Srila Prabhupada. Because in 26 Second Avenue, we didn't know Krishna very much. We had Lord Jagannath, and I personally served Srila Prabhupada's Radha Krishna deities, which were not kept in the temple, but only in Srila Prabhupada's apartment. And in the morning, I used to make garlands for them and bathe them, and it was very special. So they're always with me, as well as the mercy of Lord Jagannath, who is very merciful. So the devotees, those devotees, they were fully surrendered to Srila Prabhupada. And we should glorify them for their service to Srila Prabhupada in collecting the money to purchase this land, the Juhu land. And I know we have many plaques to, you know, maybe they're devotees or non-devotees, people who donated, you know, money, but I don't think they donated to purchase this land. That Prabhupada requested from New York. So I think we should honor them by just, you know, a small statement just posted somewhere so people know the history of Juhu land and how it was acquired. And one can never be at any loss by glorifying Prabhupada's disciples, because they perform so much service to Srila Prabhupada, and he has such love for them. So we can also have that love by taking Prabhupada's words very seriously as our life and soul, just like he took the words of his spiritual master. And after he fulfilled the desire of the spiritual master, then he took the desire of Lord Chaitanya. So we can only imagine how dear Srila Prabhupada is to Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. Because Lord Chaitanya deputed Lord Nityananda to preach in Bengal. But he instructed Srila Prabhupada to preach in the whole world. So one cannot even imagine how dear he is to Krishna. In the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Lord Chaitanya is always more pleased when his devotees are glorified and his devotees are worshipped. So this is a very important thing in spiritual life. One should not commit offenses to devotees. to your God brothers. And you should take care of each other. Srila Prabhupada was very disappointed when his disciples were having troubles and no one tried to help them. Prabhupada was not pleased with that at all. So this is a very important part of spiritual life. And association of devotees is extremely important. If you go away from association of devotees, it's very hard to prosecute spiritual life. I myself was in government service for some time after Prabhupada's departure, but then Prabhupada pulled me out of the entanglement of material of that life and took me from the USA back to India, where it's more of a home because there's so many nice devotees now, much more than previously, from 7 temples to hundreds of temples. So we can see that Srila Prabhupada is with us because only he has the power to make those type of accomplishments. In New York, Radhanath Maharaj was there for some time, and he went in the subways also to collect money. So he also collected money for the Juhu land. And he went with a devotee named Mangala, who was the head of the Vaikuntha Players, a theatrical group in New York that Prabhupada enjoyed very much. And he had one of those big booming voices, fit for the theater. And they would go into the subway, and the people in the subway couldn't go anywhere because the subway's moving and the doors are locked, So they had to listen to what he had to say about Krishna consciousness. And then the two of them would go down the aisle, one taking one side, one the other side of the aisle, and collect money for New York Temple. So all these devotees, great devotees, were doing such advanced service for Srila Prabhupada, even without their knowing it. But Prabhupada took that service and made it something very special to fulfill his promise to these deities. So we should honor that. And there should be a plaque somewhere commemorating that. Very small thing, but very important in our spiritual advancement to honor our predecessor devotees, many of them who are no longer present here. But that's very important. What time is it now? Can't see the... What? Oh, 8:30, okay. So when I was traveling with Srila Prabhupada, one day he called me and he said, I only want to go back to Godhead to eat khichoris and lagdus with Krishna. So that's the reciprocation when one realizes Prabhupada through his teachings, and you become motivated. Prabhupada can talk to you, he can appear to you. Like he said, when you become Krishna conscious, Krishna, you will be able to see Krishna as he is. In one letter, Srila Prabhupada wrote to me when I was preaching overseas. He wrote me 150 letters altogether, I believe. And in one of them he said, I take it for granted that you are one of Lord Chaitanya's selected devotees. Now what that means, I don't know, but because in Krishna consciousness, as Krishna tells Arjuna in Bhagavad-gita, we have been born many times. I remember all of them, but you don't. So we don't remember our past lives now. But Prabhupada knows our past lives. So he can instruct us. So very important to prosecute Lord Chaitanya's vision of the world, being fully Krishna conscious, Krishna consciousness in every town and village. So one has to be able to give up all one's material identity and take an identity that Lord Chaitanya has provided for you to spread Krishna consciousness. So in that way, one is called to surrender, not only for initiation, but again and again. Every day is a new day to surrender. Every day is a new beginning. So this is the special nature of the Krishna consciousness movement, that the spiritual world is present now because Srila Prabhupada's worship of the Lord and his request of the Lord to appear before us, just like we see today. So this is very special. This is the spiritual world. We only have to act in that spiritual conception and give up the conception of I and mine, needing to own something. The only thing we want to own is our desire to serve Krishna, our desire to be Krishna's servant. We don't need any other identity. GBC, BBT, trustee, these people identify themselves, but actually we are none of these. All we are servants of Krishna. One day Prabhupada in India, Prabhupada called me into his room and said he wanted me to go to Nepal with Gargamuni to assist him in preaching our movement there. And that time I was GBC, BBT trustee. There were 3 original BBT trustees. One of them was Karanda Prabhu in Los Angeles, myself, who was in Asia, and the third one. Who's the third one? Does anyone know? The third one was Srila Prabhupada. So one should understand the history of the Krishna consciousness movement. Like Srila Prabhupada said, through your service, your names will be recorded in the history of the Krishna consciousness movement. Just like our Prabhu Trivikram has done so much service for Srila Prabhupada. That I remember talking with him after we moved from 26 Second Avenue to 61 Second Avenue. And I used to walk up Second Avenue with Srila Prabhupada, who everyone knows he was not that tall physically, but he looked very, very tall because he carried himself so regally, like a lion surveying its property. Srila Prabhupada was very comfortable in his own body, and he had no fear of anything. So he was fearless, and the way he walked, one could see that. And walking with him along Second Avenue was so nice, because it was only a few blocks to the other temple from his apartment. And I used to talk with Trivikram Prabhu at 61 Second Avenue. He was a very early disciple, and he's done so much service in preaching the Krishna consciousness movement, very simply, with his own style, that easily understandable, which is why people like to hear from him. So we should take advantage, because these devotees are treasures, because they touched Srila Prabhupada. They had contact with Srila Prabhupada. In Vrindavan in 1977, when Prabhupada was quite ill, some of us used to massage his lotus feet while he was resting. And his feet were so soft. I mean, that's why they were lotus feet. So, so Prabhupada didn't require our service, but he was utilizing our service not for himself, but to bring us back to home, back to Godhead. So as we see in this verse, the lotus feet of the Lord and his pure devotees are very, very special. So, we should take that seriously. Prabhupada didn't require our service, but he engaged us in service to bring us back to home, back to Godhead. In Switzerland, not Switzerland, in Australia, when I traveled with Prabhupada from Malaysia to Sydney, Australia, with the deities of Radha Gopinath we carried on the plane. And that's how much Prabhupada would personally involve himself in worshiping Krishna and bringing Krishna everywhere in the world, which he took as his own mission to spread Krishna consciousness throughout the world, after he had already fulfilled the mission his Guru Maharaj assigned to him. So I was taking care of him in his apartment, and I think I was his secretary at the time, GPC secretary. And in the middle of the night, I heard his bell ringing, about 2:30 in the morning. And I went into his room, and his room was very dark, but there was a small light where he had a big Bhagavatam that he used to carry with him, open to the 7th canto.
Sound is very low, so we can close this mic a little bit.
What's that?
This we can close a little bit.
Oh, sorry. So Prabhupada didn't say anything at first, but he motioned for me to sit down. And I could see that tears were coming from his eyes. So I was very curious. So I sat down, and then he started talking about the qualities of a Vaishnava, particularly his compassion for the fallen souls. And he was reading from the verses of Prahlad Maharaj's prayers, that he didn't want to go back to home, back to Godhead alone, but he wanted to bring the conditioned souls with him. So this is, for me, this was very imprinted in my mind, Srila Prabhupada's compassion. And the only one that comes to mind with that same quality is Lord Nityananda. So I take it for granted that Srila Prabhupada is an expansion of Lord Nityananda, because who else would have the power to convert the whole world? In another letter, Srila Prabhupada said, our mission is to save the world. Now, Prabhupada is not exaggerating, because Prabhupada knows that nothing is impossible for Krishna. So no project was too big for Prabhupada to take on. He was fearless in his devotion to his mission of spreading Krishna consciousness. Whenever there was a preaching opportunity, Prabhupada took advantage. When I was in Malaysia, he came to preach there because we set up a bunch of programs in 4 different cities: Kuala Lumpur, Tilak Onsen, Ipoh, and Penang. So I traveled with Prabhupada by car in the, what they call the equatorial sun, and it was so hot in that car. And Prabhupada went through such difficulties in order to preach Krishna consciousness. And then after we finished preaching, then we continued on to Australia to install the deities that we brought with us, Radha Gopinath. They were about this high, carved in marble. And that was instruction. But Srila Prabhupada's compassion, I think, is the most, this is the symptom of the Vaishnav. And he especially loved Prahlad Maharaj and used to constantly, when I joined the movement, when I was initiated actually, I had to go to Montreal because Prabhupada had just returned from India, and there was a technicality with his green card, his visa. So he had to stay in Montreal until that was cleared up. And at the time, Govinda Dasi and Gorsander were taking personal care of Srila Prabhupada. And Hansaduta Prabhu was there. And so Prabhupada was lecturing on the 7th canto at that time, the same part that he would years later call me in to talk about. And in Delhi, when I was there, I was acting as Prabhupada's secretary for the first pandals that were held. Particularly the one in New Delhi was very notable because Achyutananda Prabhu and Dinanath Prabhu were leading kirtans. And devotees were jumping up and down so hard, the stage was like shaking back and forth. But after the Prabhupada gave his lecture to 30 to 40,000 people, this was the introduction of Krishna consciousness in India. And we would go in the back where there was a room where Prabhupada could meet VIPs and have darshan. Prabhupada would have me turn on the tape recorder of his lecture, and he would listen to it like he was just hearing it for the first time, and he was enjoying it. Because Prabhupada didn't give that lecture. That lecture was given directly from Lord Chaitanya and Krishna. So he was enjoying listening to it. And that was a very, very nice time. So Prabhupada is available to all of you in the same way he was available to me, but through his teachings. But you have to realize him. You can't just read it, you have to live it. And that way you'll get Prabhupada's association. So he's making himself available to everyone. He used to write, in New York, before there was a temple at 26 2nd Avenue, Prabhupada had meetings at various places. And one place was at his friend Dr. Misra, which I believe was at 72nd Street, West 72nd Street in Manhattan. And Prabhupada would handwrite a notice for the meetings and post them. And he would write in his beautiful handwriting, which was very flowing, he would write, "Please take advantage of this great opportunity." So that's our choice, to take advantage of this opportunity or not. To think of ourselves or to think of Prabhupada, to think of Krishna. We didn't know anything else but Prabhupada. So that's all we talked about. We didn't have enough information about Krishna yet because Krishna book was not out, teaching of Lord Chaitanya was not out yet. So we only talked about Prabhupada. And nothing is more pleasing to Krishna than the glorification of his pure devotee. In a few days will be the appearance day of Pundarik Vijayanidhi, a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya, who also appeared in Krishna Lila. But he appeared as a rich man, very opulent rich man, and no one could understand him. Gadardhar was troubled by his appearance, so Mukunda Prabhu, a devotee of Lord Chaitanya, decided to enlighten him about Pundarik Vijanidhi. So he brought Gadardhar to observe him, and Kunda recited a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam about the Putana witch and how Krishna accepted her as his mother and gave her liberation. And hearing this verse, Pundarik Vijanidhi, he became like a crazy man, throwing off all his opulent clothes, throwing all his opulent belongings, and collapsing on the floor in a coma of trance. And seeing this, Gadardhar felt very bad, that he had committed an offense in his mind by thinking this person an opulent rich man and not a great devotee. So Gadardhar was thinking in his mind, how can I make up for this offense? So one of you must know the story. Do you know what he did? So in order to make up for his offense, Gadardhar requested from Lord Chaitanya, can I take initiation from Pundarik Vijanidhi, who Lord Chaitanya had been calling for previously. And so everyone wanted to know, why is he calling for this person? So Lord Chaitanya told Gadardhar, do it immediately, become his disciple. The spiritual master can forgive the disciple for any offense. So this was what Gadardhar did. I think we're about out of time, so, right? So, does anyone have any questions?
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for the nice class. In between you mentioned that one should accept the order of his spiritual master as his life and soul. So in my case I can see that some orders which are convenient for following, we do that very easily. But some orders are difficult to follow and they involve some level of risk. So how can we develop faith to follow those orders also?
You have to think of Bali Maharaj, who I'm named after. And he surrendered everything to the Lord, even his body. His body, his possessions, everything that he had. So the process of surrender is not just an initiation. It involves surrendering to the instruction of the spiritual master. Like, I didn't want to send the money for the New York temple to Juhu, but my spiritual master requested it. So how could I not give it to him and still consider myself his disciple? So one has to think like that, because nothing is impossible for Krishna. So following the instruction of the Guru is everything. Pleasing him is even more. Sometimes you have to understand what he wants and please him, because understanding what he's asking. Don't take superficial, but understand the deeper meaning. Srila Prabhupada's involved in carrying out Lord Chaitanya's missions, which overrides our own personal ambitions. So one has to take that as our life and soul, not think of me and mine. Oh, I'm the president, we collected this money, so we want to use it for our temple. That's very small thinking. That's not Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is pleasing Krishna's senses, not pleasing our senses, in renouncing the material world, in living simply like Srila Prabhupada, not, spending money foolishly for personal satisfaction. Does that help any? Yeah? Okay. Any other questions? Okay, all goes to the Prabhupada. Hari Bol.